Serious, what is the most paranormal or unexplainable event or events you have witnessed? I was in my laundry room and I heard someone come up behind me and I swear they whispered. I screamed so loud and thought it was my husband playing a prank on me. When I turned around no one was there and it was so freaky. Also, when I was a teenager I was sitting in my room at my computer desk and piece of paper and pen went up in the air and slammed back down. I ran downstairs to tell my mom and I was crying hysterically. My mom thinks I just hallucinated it. I work in a prison. Before my job in the jail changed, I used to have about 1.5 hours of downtime before it was time to punch out. My sergeant at the time asked if I would cover the 11 PM count on one of the blocks. He didn't care what I did before or after, just do the count. No prob. I'm sitting at our Times Square area. One hallway leads to 4 blocks and another hallway leads to the other 4. I'm sitting in front of one of those hallways. I hear someone walking towards me from behind. But I realize I don't hear keys. We all have keys, except inmates. I turn around. No one there. I think, okay, maybe I just imagined it. Guy sitting in the area with me asks who it was. I guess I didn't imagine it. Alright then. 11 PM comes. I go to the block. No one is letting me in. WTF. I go back to the Times Square area to call and let the officer know not to panic. I'm coming. I just can't get in. As I'm on the phone, I feel someone behind me and they lean into my ear and whisper forcefully, "What are you doing?" I wave my hand back to signal to them to stop. I hang up and turn to yell at who it was. No one is there. No one is in any hallway. I'm all alone. We have so many stories from this freaking place. But your story reminded me of a second part of mine, so I had to tell it. I'll bring out this story again. It happened to me 7 years ago, and I can't figure it out, but I lost an hour of time in what felt to me like minutes. At the time I was working from home after a serious illness diagnosis. I had settled into a routine, up at 7 AM, and do house stuff and shower, then at 8 AM start prepping my work, and laying out my day. Phone calls and emails from 8 to 9. This is all I remember. It was 7:55, and I brewed a cup of Keurig coffee on my kitchen located on the main floor of my house. I went upstairs to my office and turned on my computer to settle in and realized I forgot the coffee in the kitchen. I went back downstairs and got the coffee. As soon as I realized I forgot it, couldn't have been more than the time it took Windows to boot up, but I took a sip and the coffee was cold. Not warm, but actually cold. I thought my Keurig was broke, but I looked at the clock and it said 9:14. So whereas I expected it to be 8:05 maximum, somehow an hour and 10 minutes passed without explanation. It was very bothersome. I have no idea where that hour went. I have never had any blackout before or since. No seizures, and the meds I was on shouldn't have caused a lapse like that. I don't think I fell asleep because I distinctly remember typing my password and saying out loud, "Shoot, I forgot the coffee." It kinda left me uneasy a bit. Nothing like had ever happened to me before or since. This happened to me too. I posted this the last time someone mentioned it 5 months ago. I don't think it was cause there were detectors on each floor. My GF and I had a similar experience a year ago. Our phone alarms went off at 6:30 AM like usual. We got out of bed and we did our usual morning routine to get ready for work. We showered, got dressed, and I texted a coworker at 7 AM saying that I would meet them at 7:45. They replied and said, "Okay," at 7:30. Then my GF and I had our morning coffee together and I went to get my shoes on. Then I looked at the clock and it was 9 AM. I freaked the frick out because I was late for work. I thought my phone clock was off, but my GF's was the same. We both had missed calls and texts from the span of 7:30 until 9 AM. We were both weirded out by the situation. 1.5 hours passed while we were in the kitchen for 10 minutes. I have one. It must have been some kind of hallucination, but it really scared me. I was sitting in my bed watching YouTube for a couple hours. I got up and reached forward to set something on my nightstand or whatever. I had this strange undescribable feeling that I hadn't actually moved from where I was sitting at all. I quickly turned around and looked at where I was sitting seconds before, and there I was, still sitting there. I was outside my body. I could see the shocked, horrified expression come to my face at such a strange sight. I quickly sat back down right in the same spot and nothing strange happened again. After my dad passed away, my stepmom kept asking me if I found the book he was reading in his last month or months. She didn't know the title. We looked all over the house for it. Eventually found it with a stack of magazines. Definitely not where it belonged in the house. My stepmom recognized it immediately when found. The title of the book was Hello from Heaven. I also received a phone call 2 days after he passed away. The phone call was from his phone number. For some reason I was too scared to answer. Asked the only person who had the phone, stepmom, if she had called from it. She said she left it in the garage where he always worked. This was 14 years ago. I still regret not answering the phone. Unsure if it's a haunted house or more of something becoming attached to me. Not long after I met my current boyfriend I would spend the night at his house. Normally I fall asleep as soon as I hit the pillow, but at his house I would be awake super late feeling creeped out. I blamed it on being in a strange house. After a while I used to fall asleep at a decent time, but I would wake up 2 to 3 am and try to let my eyes adjust to the darkness. Small town equals very little light pollution. Once I would adjust I felt like I could see a little boy on top of the grandfather clock. This would happen every night for a while. I never felt scared, just confused. It looked like a boy wearing older style pajamas kicking his legs on top of the clock. Still I would blame it on sleep paralysis / dreaming or my imagination. When I would go back to my parents' house for the school nights I would start waking up in the middle of the night seeing the same apparition sitting on the dresser or ledge in my room. I slept alone in the basement of the house. After months of seeing the "little boy" I wanted to sleep upstairs again as I figured my mind was just getting to me. One evening I was home alone as my brother and parents were gone to some appointment. I happened to fall asleep on the couch in the living room only to dream that the little boy was knocking down my mom's ornaments that were on the coffee table. I woke up in a cold sweat and looked at the table. Sure enough, the ornaments were broken. Of course they could have been broken beforehand, and I never noticed. It started to get chilly in the living room, so I moved to my mother's bedroom to watch TV before they came home. In her bedroom I kept seeing stuff out of the corner of my eye that looked like the "little boy", but never really had a full-on view. At this point I was sure it wasn't sleep paralysis / dreaming, because I could move when I woke up and sometimes I would be wide awake. I fell asleep in my mom's bed and woke up to the little boy laughing and running in the closet. Friday of that week I went to my boyfriend's house and he knew something was up, but I wouldn't tell him out of fear that he would think I was crazy. That night I was helping his mom bake and I happened to mention that I was having really weird dreams about a little boy and she asked me if he was a young one with his jammies on. She knew what I was talking about. She told me that their house was pretty old and all throughout the time they lived there strange stuff would happen, such as stuff being moved or hearing voices or laughter, but the past 6 to 8 months things had stopped happening. It's been 3 years and I've moved out with my boyfriend to start post-secondary. Still seeing / sensing / dealing with whatever it is. Things being moved / voice. When I was 13, I woke up in the middle of the night to a strange man's voice. I couldn't understand what he was saying because he was talking really fast, but at one point I heard it say my brother's name and then it started laughing maniacally. My dad heard it too and came running into my room and turned the lights on. No one was there. Absolutely no explanation. Another time, I woke up in the middle of the night and I heard what sounded like a cult gathering right outside my window. It was like 3 am and I could just very clearly hear a group of people singing / chanting while a baby wailed. After about 10 to 20 minutes, it suddenly stopped. I used to live in a town that was pretty strange altogether, but the house was even more so. Most of my elder family that grew up there had also had weird experiences. I remember one time, I got up to use the toilet. The bathroom was next door, which was across the way from my bedroom, and I shit you not, a woman in a full vintage nurse's outfit came running out of the bathroom with a washcloth and into my bedroom. I have no idea if there used to be a poorly person accommodating it years ago, but the house was very old. That is the good side of it though. There's a lot more. You'd even sit there sometimes and have this awful feeling of a bad presence. As if somebody was staring at you, eyes burning into your soul kind of feeling, you know? Freaky stuff. About 5 years ago my husband and I went to visit his grandma. Big, beautiful 2-story house. I was going to head upstairs to put some pajamas on and saw a woman walk across the top of the stairs. It was only my husband, young daughter and his grandma in the house, and whoever I saw wasn't Granny. I went in the living room and told them what I saw, and his grandma goes, "Yeah, that's Lori. She visits a lot." Lori was my husband's mom who had died when he was 11. I was so fucking spooked after that I barely slept the rest of the time we were there. After my mother died I went to her grave a few times a week. I usually had my kids with me, and this one day as we passed all the older cemeteries my eldest son who was 6 at the time asked Mom, "What are all those people waiting for? Why are they just standing there?" The cemetery was empty and not a single human was there. When we got to my mom's grave he held my hand and said, "Don't worry, Grandma is with Mom and they are happy." Mom was my mother's sister who passed away before my husband and I were even married. My son knew nothing of her or what we called her. He also would tell us when someone had died in a house. Please, tell us more. My kids are a huge disappointment. No imaginary ghost friends. No seeing long dead family members. Terrible. I'm being sarcastic about my kids. Lol. They really have never said/seen anything, so I really enjoy reading about other people's kids seeing stuff. When he was younger he wasn't verbal until 3. He was diagnosed as autistic, and I was told he would never talk. Ever since he was little he would stare at the wall and talk to things that were there. When he was able to form words and was taught sign language he would communicate. When he was scared. When he was 4 he cried the same time every night because the man in the window wouldn't stop looking in. There was also the shadow child that has followed him that started around the same time. One of the creepiest things was when he was 3.5. We went to the store and the minute we walked in he kept repeating 3. It didn't matter what I said, he just kept saying 3. I noticed he had to go potty, doing the infamous potty dance, so I asked the nearest clerk where the restroom was, and she said straight down aisle 3, can't miss it. He stopped saying it after that. Another time while at my parents' house he kept saying old woman and pointing to the closets. The previous owner had died in the house. He wasn't scared of her and would often laugh when looking in closets, but he hated one room of the house and refused to sleep in it. He said it was the bedroom. On the day my father died I was alone in the apartment we lived in. While everyone was out mourning at my uncle's, I stayed home because I didn't want people to stare at me sobbing. Anyways, I'm in the living room and I hear footsteps in my mother's room that has a balcony. I straight up hear the balcony door open, so now I'm like sobbing and shouting asking who's there. I go check it out and there's no one there except a strong smell of tobacco in the room. My father used to smoke on the balcony. Never told anyone about it and just kept it for myself. Later learned my mother got blamed for my dad's death, even though they loved each other since they were teens, and my dad was simply a victim of cancer, and a massive brawl broke out. So I just thought of it as my dad coming home because he couldn't be bothered to hear people arguing. Mine's not crazy scary, but it is true. I was in the living room with my grandma. We were the only ones home. She was working on a crossword puzzle, and I was messing around on my iPad. TV was off, windows were closed. All of a sudden, clear as day, I hear my name being whispered, but since it was so quiet it sounded loud. I looked up to my grandma, thinking it was her asking her if she said something. She said no, but I heard your name. When I was a kid, I took up lethal work after we did a bit in Cub Scouts. Every time I was using dyes or finishes in the basement, I thought someone was staring at me. Then one day, while dyeing leather, I felt this weird pinch in my shoulder, and I involuntarily turned in my chair. That night, 4 finger-shaped bruises showed up on that shoulder. I don't believe in the paranormal, but kid me was convinced my parents' house was haunted. I never did find a good explanation for the bruises, though. When I was about 5 to 8 I had a little ghost girl that I played with. We played board games and she carried around a small stuffed bunny. My parents saw game pieces move when no one was there, but I saw her. They also saw her on occasion. One night our house caught on fire. Electric short in the kitchen. Parents called 911 etc. Fireman said the fire melted a pipe and under the sink and put itself out. There was soot everywhere. When we came back the next day, written about little girl leveling the soot on the kitchen wall, it said I did it. No one had been in since the fire. I was a kid, maybe 10 years old. I came inside in the evening after playing outside in the backyard. I stopped by the exterior door to take my shoes off and just happened to notice that the basement door across the room was closed and dead-bolted. It was an old door that didn't stay totally closed unless dead-bolted. I look down to untie one of my shoes and I hear a loud bang and look up to see the basement door wide open. I noped the fuck out of there with my shoes still on. My parents were in the other room and didn't hear a thing. I went back later and the door/lock were totally undamaged. I have absolutely no idea what caused it and can't really come up with any rational explanation. I was pretty afraid of going in the basement for a while. Upvoting because I really love these posts and read them every damn time. Hope it takes off. Edit, might as well share one. I didn't see a ghost until I was 19 years old and did not believe in them until then. I had the mentality that I'll believe it when I see it. I was at my friend's rental house who had a baby and they kept talking about how their house was haunted. Particularly the room the baby slept in, and that a woman would be seen in white walking into the baby's room at night. A few times my friend, the husband, would be alone with the baby at night while the wife was at work and see the women walk by the open door in the hallway towards the baby's room while the baby slept. He wouldn't think anything of it at first, because he would think it was his wife. Then he would remember she's at work and haul ass to the baby's room, only to find the kid crying and no one there. Fast forward to my encounter. I was hanging out with my friend, the wife, at their house while my friend, the husband, was at work and helping out watching the baby. Starting hearing a ton of noises and my friend said she just wanted to get the kid, get in the car and leave. I laughed and tried to tell her it was nothing, but I complied. We get to the car and she tells me she forgot the dog and asked if I could go back and get him. I approach the window at the front of the house, peer into it, and see the dog standing at the sliding glass door, completely stiff with its tail pointing straight out, barking his ass off. I then look at the reflection and my heart skips several beats as I see the bottom half of a reflection of a woman in white. I nope out of there and tell her I can't go in there and tell her what I saw. We eventually go back inside once the dog slowed on the barking. I was a true believer in ghosts since that days and have had a couple other encounters. I've had a few experiences, but the most confirmed that I have is when my ex, myself and a friend got an apartment together. She would ask if we used her private bathroom, which we never did, but she said she would come home and her mats in her bathroom would be thrown all over. Then later on she was woken up by a voice that said look over here, and she did and saw her keys jingling by the door. She said she rolled over to ignore it to pretend it wasn't there. She moved out shortly after that, so the room was empty. Afterwards, my ex and I saw/heard weird things from that room. One time I was in the living room and heard the shower curtain slide open, the door close on its own, heard movement that shouldn't be there. My ex started using the closet in that room to get changed while I was sleeping, since he had to be up at 3 AM. He said one morning he went to get his uniform and his clothes moved around before he touched any of them. After all of this, a friend and I hung out in the room with a recording device trying to do ghost hunter shit. We did capture some noise from the bathroom, but the only voice recorded that wasn't ours said shut the door. Okay, so this happened when I was a young teenager. My friends and I loved the paranormal, and we had always wanted to contact ghosts. One day, my guy friend, let's call him Jay, makes a Ouija board and ends up contacting a ghost named A. Seemed paranoid for his safety whenever Jay talked to him, so we decide to have a group Ouija board session. We come prepared to make sure we have a safe session: candles, salt, lavender. We didn't have any sage. We start the session, and immediately, things go wrong. The ghost we contact is called T. Immediately after we contact him, an air of uneasiness filled the room. We ask what he is, and he spells out proxy on the board. After researching, we found that proxy is someone which represents for someone else. He represents something much more evil. Right about then, we hear a loud bang from the closet. My two friends, J and P, go over to look. I stay behind, as to not end the session without saying goodbye. They both come running out screaming. P says that they saw a tall, skinny all-black shadow creature with white eyes and tiny pupils. We all freak out and end the session there. We go upstairs to get holy water, and when we come back, the board and the stuff around it had been thrown across the room, with everything a mess, and the planchette, which we had taken off the board, right back on it. Subsequent investigations reveal that A comes in darkness and T comes in light. So we always kept the lights out, so we could talk to A. They also reveal that T wants to drain the essence of my two friends, who share a last name, but aren't related. We all are really worried, so we keep an eye out for anything unusual. The most we got was more sightings of T from time to time, as well as a ghost that was the inverse of T, all white, with black eyes and white pupils. We thought it was A, trying to protect us. Eventually, we get the house smudged, and the sightings stop. We've all moved on, but it still gives me the shakes when I think about it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more future content.